If I know my rules, then there ain't no going back.
Then there ain't no turning back.
If I know my rules, then there ain't no turning back.
Then there ain't no turning back.
Trying to make it back home. Haven't been in
This whole
so
situation
long.
kind of started by the Ethiopian government deciding to postpone elections due to Corona. And the Tigray region decided, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to hold our own elections. And they did that. And because they did that, then the government attacked the region of Tigray. And then they allowed another nation, which is unheard of in terms of one government allowing another government to send in their troops and allow them to, just terrorize their own people. So it's definitely the Ethiopian government, Abiy Ahmed, the prime minister, who was a Nobel Peace Prize winner. A Nobel Peace Prize winner, starting a war, that's not very peaceful. And the dictator of Eritrea, Isaias Afwerki, him as well. It's both of them, working together.
What he had won, the prime minister, what he had won the Nobel Peace Prize for was essentially making peace with Eritrea. Well, there was essentially no written treaty. It was all like a personal thing that had happened. There was no actual written treaty that said, okay, there's peace now. And so what we discovered was was essentially a genocide pact. That this was okay, you're gonna back us up with your military, right, Eritrea? Right. All right, so your enemy is my enemy, we're friends. What was it? I think it was 1998 to 2000, there was a border war between Eritrea and Ethiopia. And that northern border is Tigray. And so it was about a piece of land there. And people died, military passed away during that time. But since that time, that's kind of when that deep-seated hatred for Tigray came from, especially because EPRDF was the ruling government of the federal government, and the TPLF was the head of that. So that's where that kind of hate started to brew. And then from then on, it's been seeded in them that without, how do I say this? That the only reason that Eritrea has not grown as a country is because of Tigray. They say things like, don't even bother building that because Tigray is just going to come destroy it. That's been indoctrinated in the people.
The TPLF is the party that the people have voted for in Tigray, because the people of Tigray trust in the TPLF to have the best interests of themselves. Through the history of TPLF fighting people who have continuously tried to exterminate the Tigray region of Ethiopia.
So when the Ethiopian, or the prime minister specifically, has blamed the unrest on the TPLF, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's lies. He's continuously lied throughout this whole thing. I posted something today on my Instagram, and I believe it was early into this war, and he had tweeted something out like, "Oh, we've captured the capital city of Tigray, which is Mekelle," and he said we captured their city, so now this whole situation is over. We've basically said the war was over, and he basically said, "Oh, now we're gonna rebuild Tigray together as this one Ethiopia movement." And there's still a war going on, and everyone is starting to be exposed. So he's continuously lied throughout this process, and just always tried to save face. Again, he's a Nobel Peace Prize winner who's committing war against his own people. So I think that should kind of tell the story right there. But it's a lot of lies. It's a lot of deception. It's a lot of look this way, don't look over here at the nasty truth. And yeah, I think it's just lies.
And what are your thoughts on how phone lines and internet have been turned off, or lines have been cut? What are your thoughts on that?
It's disheartening, but then again, it's a system of the government. They're doing this because there is a war still going on, and they don't want people to have that communication, especially when they have military tactics that they want to, proceed with. they're going to cut the phone line so no one is able to like talk about it in terms of like US and people back home. So it's a systematic thing that they're using. It's a weapon that they're using in terms of like the banking system and like the phone lines and stuff like that. Even when I was out in Ethiopia about 2-3 years ago, the people already knew. They were talking to me about it, and they're like, yeah, the government is just kind of messing with us. It was already seen before, you know? So now that it's like a wartime, it's just like that much more detrimental to the people because they don't have anything. And then you're going to cut off any chance they have of, you know, having hope with talking to a relative or just expressing their feelings with the people around them, with their community. So
like we've always said this is like, why harm the civilians? Why go into the cities and start to murder them? Why burn their farming equipment and their crops, like, and making sure they don't farm so they starve for the next year? Like, if you want to fight the military, go fight the military. That's fine with us. We don't give a shit. Like, that's what militaries do, right? But why harm the civilians? So I feel like if they even came to the agreement that they're going to withdraw out of like civilian populated areas and just fight with the military, that to us would be a win. That to us would be a win. Fight with the Tigray military, sure. But leave the civilians alone. Stop killing them. Stop looting their hospitals and burning factories so people don't have a place to work. That to me is the sick part. The war, militaries fight. That's part of history, whatever, do what you do. But like to go into the cities and just like kill kids, murder unsuspecting people, not allow them to bury their loved ones, that to me is the sick part. I'm just like, why?
You just read the stories online. It's like endless stories of priests getting killed, religious sites that have been there for centuries being looted, religious texts, you know, from the Christian religion, from the Muslim religion, being just looted, being taken away. People's crops are being burned once again. Their pots and pans being stolen. Like, everything is being taken away from these people. And then again, like, just the massacres, like, how many people's lives have been affected by this? And it's not affected in the way like in America, like, oh, your phone service goes out. Like, oh, I'm affected for a day. Like, they're walking for 2 weeks to get to Sudan. Like, not through paved roads, through countryside with no electricity, no lights. They're walking in the fucking dark, walking amongst the wilderness, like with hyenas and lions and things like that. Like, that's why this shit needs to be talked about. And that's why we have to spread this message, because it's so severe and it's so shocking when you hear the reports of girls being gang raped. And it's just horrible. It's a nightmare. It's really a nightmare, and that's why it needs to be exposed, because we don't want this to happen anymore. Like, we're not standing for it.
They say home is where the heart is.
Home is where the heart
Trying to
is.
harvest the backbone.
Harvest the backbone.
Homeless, no identity.
No identity.
Refugee, no serenity.
Refugee, no serenity.
Genocide draining my energy.
Draining my energy.
Rather die with some dignity.
Die with some dignity.
On this.
Essentially, the Tigray genocide is happening to extensions of me. My family, my literal direct family, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, my parents, all their siblings. It's a small portion of our family that made it here to the States, but most of our family is in Tigray, and all of Tigray is suffering. And so cutting off a limb for them is cutting off a limb for me. So if my life matters here, so should theirs. From like starting November, when they shut off the phone lines, the first time we heard from anybody was, I think it was like late January. And we had heard because my dad's friend traveled from our home in Aksum in Tigray. He traveled through the war zone to the capital city, where the only place where the phone lines were available, in Mekelle in Tigray. So he traveled there, and he traveled there to call us to tell us that my cousin and my mom's nephew had been executed. This civilian, unsuspecting. They came into his home, lined him up, along with all the other neighbors who were kind of hiding there, thinking that was the safest place for them to be. And specifically the men. He was like 35, 40. That's when we had mourned, but it already had been months had passed. My mom hadn't spoken to her sister. That was her only son who was murdered. So then after that, like maybe a few months later or a couple weeks later, the phone lines opened again. We finally got to hear her voice, my mom's sister. Of course, she like, got wrenched, you know, like she's single mother, her only child. And like come to find out, like more of our family had also been executed, more civilians, you know, like another one of my mom's half-sister's sons. He was getting married and he went from the countryside to the city to buy his soon-to-be fiancé some jewelry, and they killed him there. My uncle is in his 50s, killed him too. I mean, it's a bloodbath. It's disgusting. For the majority of the genocide, international media wasn't allowed into Tigray. And so that meant, one, a ton of propaganda by the government. There was a point months into the war where thousands of people had already died, where the prime minister said, not a single civilian has died, which was crazy to us because our family had literally died. We knew that they had died. And so I think without having the access of Western media, there wasn't anyone to validate what we were saying. They were saying that we were paid by TPLF to talk about this. Or it's like, no, you just have to be human to give a shit, you know? And so, yeah, I think that's why people aren't calling it a genocide. I think that's why people aren't calling it at all, is because there hasn't been enough coverage. People don't know. And when they do know, maybe they don't care. When the refugees started fleeing to Sudan, within like the first week or so, it was like thousands of refugees pouring in per day. And then suddenly it stopped. And as the refugees were trickling in, the few that were trickling at that point, they said, they're stopping us before we get here. They're literally stopping us from crossing the border. The Ethiopian military is sitting there waiting for us. Yes. And murdering some and making some others turn around and go back into a war zone. So it's like, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. And we've also been in contact with some people who've had a chance to go to Sudan, go to the refugee camps, and the people there are desperate. But the one thing that we've heard over and over again is that the people there are worried about their families in Tigray. And they're saying to all of us in the diaspora, focus on Tigray, at least we're here, at least we're safe. The UN is giving us something at least. They're like, put your focus on Tigray. Even the people in the refugee camps are saying that. How crazy is that? Like people who are refugees in desperate situation telling us, we're fine. Look over, like they're the ones over there in desperate situations. So what we know about the refugees, imagine 1,000 times worse of the people who are still stuck in Tigray. It's crazy. Like, it's sad to say, but we've kind of realized that the UN doesn't give a shit about us. The US doesn't really give a shit about us. They're all speaking like strong concern, but when there's people dying every day, it's like, that means nothing, you know, like they can't eat from your words, you know? So for us, it's really just been about kind of just bringing awareness, and like, maybe if the right person says something to the right people, something will happen, but clearly we're not the right people. And I don't know, like, yeah, we're Black in the United States, you know, like that's also a thing. So maybe that has something to do with it. We're Black immigrants in the United States, you know, like maybe if like more white cis hetero men started to speak up and say, hey, there's a genocide happening in Tigray, maybe somebody would listen, you know. But right now it's like oppressed people trying to speak for people who are oppressed. It's hard to imagine that something's going to happen from just our voices, you know? And so at this point, to be frank, our hope is just in the military of Tigray. Or like, they're the ones on the ground. We're hoping that maybe they fight the invaders enough that the people have peace, because we're done holding out hope for like these big bodies of government who clearly don't give a shit about us, you know?
If I know my rules,
If I know my rules,
then there ain't no turning back.
then there ain't no turning back.
If I know my rules,
Know my rules,
then there ain't no turning back.